the day. We are finally making bread. All of the things that we've been talking about over the last several lessons come together today, and we'll start right off with the 10 easy steps to making bread. Now I know 10 might sound like a lot, but once you've gone through this process a couple of times, it'll be kind of like tying your shoe. You won't have to stop and think about each individual step. Now, step number 1 is to mill fresh flour, and obviously if you are purchasing your own flour already ground, then you will skip this step and move on to step 2, which is measuring ingredients. But I've got my bucket of wheat ready, and I'm just going to scoop it into my mill. And I like to pour it in kind of slowly just so I can check and make sure there's no pieces of husk or stubble in there. If there were, it wouldn't really hurt anything, but okay, that's about enough. All right, now this will take about 5 or 6 minutes to run, and while that's going, I'm going to start measuring all of my other ingredients and getting everything else ready to make the bread. All right, while that was running, I got all of my ingredients ready for the bread that I'm going to make. I'm making whole wheat oatmeal today, and that's my everyday bread that I keep on hand. I use it for just about everything. Today I'm just going to make 6 regular loaves of bread, but here's my oatmeal, my whole wheat flour, my hot water, some oil. This is half a cup of sugar. Got my gluten, my instant yeast, real salt, and dough enhancer. Now I don't usually put them all in nice little bowls like this, but I did that just so that you could see everything as I put it in. I've got my dough hook fitted on here. Now if you're using another type of mixer, you might want to put on the paddle attachment first, which is, it's usually white, and it's not the dough hook. You want to put the paddle on first, and then for the batter part, and then you'll want to switch over to the dough hook as it gets to be a ball of dough. But for now, I've got my mixer set up. I've got all my ingredients. So we've done step 1 and 2 so far, which is to mill the fresh flour and to measure out all of the ingredients, and we have those ready to go. Step number 3 is to mix them. So I'm going to start pouring them in to the mixer with the liquids first. I'll pour in the water and then the oil. And then I will start to pour in the dry ingredients, except for the yeast. I will leave the yeast last. And I'm going to put in about half of the flour that I think I'm going to need. Now, if you'll remember, what our Brickbuster secret was never to measure the flour. Use hot water. Never measure the flour, and the reason for that is because most people put in 15 to 20% too much flour, and it leads to a heavy or a dry loaf of bread. So I've got about the amount that I'm going to need. I will have some left over because I'm also using oats, and oats count for part of the flour, but I'm just going to start scooping it in, and we'll let the dough tell us when it has enough flour. All right, we're pouring in the water and the oil. I'm using canola oil. You can use whatever kind you like. And next I will pour in the rolled oats. That's going to act as our blending flour. Then I'm going to put in the sugar. This is my organic sugar. I'm using half a cup. Your recipe says that you can use half a cup to 1 cup. I usually use half a cup for just everyday bread. That was the dough enhancer. This is the real salt. This is the gluten, Vital Wheat gluten. Okay, and now I'm going to start covering the water with the flour. the yeast on the top. Now we need to place the splatter screen on, and I'm going to start just kind of pulsing this around a little. Take this off just so you can see a little bit better. It's very wet and sticky. It's sticking all around the outsides. And we want to watch that because it's going to change as we continue to add flour. Give that just a little bit of time to absorb, the liquid to absorb, the flour to hydrate. Now, did you hear the mixer turn down just a little bit? So we might, the motor kind of geared down a little bit. So as that happens, we might want to turn the motor up to a higher speed. Okay, you can hear the volume of it switching down a little bit more again. A look inside there. What we're watching for is for all of this dough to come to the center, to stick to itself and not the outside. Right now it's very sticky. It's sticking all around the outsides, and we want it to come together in one big mass. So we're going to let that absorb a little bit. Now we're going to add a little bit more flour. More. Right now I'm on speed 2. On my mixer, I'm going to switch it up to speed 3. Gives it just a little bit more power. You can see it's starting to bulk up in the middle and it's starting to pull away from the outsides, but it's still very sticky. The closer we get to the end, the less flour we want to put in at a time. Now I'm going to take the splash ring off for good. Okay, now can you see it's really starting to come loose from the sides, and also look down in the bottom. Whatever type of mixer or bowl you're using, you want to watch the bottom and the sides for them to get completely clean. Got just a little more stickiness over there. I'm going to add just a touch more. Now, if your dough doesn't reach the level of the dough that's sticking, you might want to take a spatula and scrape it down, but this should be fine. Now, we've been mixing up to this point. We're trying to get that liquid to flour ratio just right without adding too much flour. Now, as soon as we get the dough clean from the bowl, I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit more just to clean off that last little remaining bit there. soon as the dough cleans the bowl, the dough is telling us it's got the right amount. And we're really transitioning at this point into kneading. We're not actually doing anything different other than we're going to stop adding flour. I'm seeing still just a little bit of sticking at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and add a little more flour. All right, we are officially in the kneading process right now, which is step 4. And that transition is a very fine line. It's basically when the flour to liquid ratio is just right, the dough is cleaning the bowl, and you're no longer adding flour. We're no longer mixing anything into the dough. Now it's kneading. And we're going to time this for about 4 to 5 minutes in this particular machine. And in your machine, it may take longer, but I'm going to show you a test. Remember, one of our Brickbuster secrets, again, after using hot water, after not measuring the flour, was to do a gluten window test, to test for that gluten development. And we're going to do that, and it will tell us exactly when we can stop kneading. All right, we've been kneading now for about 4 minutes, and I'm ready to do a gluten window test. So I put a little bit of oil on my hands, and I'm just going to see if I can stretch this out. And it's pretty good, but it is tearing, so I'm going to let it keep kneading some more. Time for another gluten window test. Okay, and there we've got nice stretchy dough. It's thin enough that when I hold it up to the light, I can see light through it. It's translucent, and it is beginning to tear just at the edge there, but it's very, very thin in that spot. We're able to get it very thin. It will eventually tear. But we're able to get it, see how thin that is? We're able to get it very, very thin before it does that. So that's what we're looking for. Well, our dough is fully kneaded, and if you haven't done so already, you'll want to go ahead and prepare your pans. This is the liquid lecithin mixture that I showed you how to make. And you just want to rub that all in the sides and the corners and the bottom of the pans. Now we want to remember our Brickbuster secret number 4, which was after we tested for the gluten development and we're ready to start shaping our dough, we want to put it on an oiled surface, not a floured surface. We don't need to add any more flour to this dough because it's just right already. So I'll get a little bit on my hands and take out my dough. Okay, see how cleanly it comes out? It wants to stick to my hands longer than it wants to stick to the bowl. All right, now I have my 9 pounds of bread dough here, and I want to take my bench knife and start to divide it into portions. And I'm making 6 loaves. So this is step number 5. Just as a quick review, step number 1 was milling fresh flour. Step number 2, measuring. 3, mixing. 4, kneading. And now we're up to step number 5, which is divide and deflate. Now you can just eyeball it if you would like to, but I like to weigh my dough. And so I've got my scale ready here. And I have written my recipe so that this comes out to about 9 pounds every time. Sometimes it's a little more or less. And then each one of these I'm going to put into 1.5 pound loaves. And this one is a little bit over. Okay, and so that one's ready to go. And these are already puffing up because the dough is still very warm from the fresh flour and the hot water that we used. A little bit extra there again. All right, these are all weighed out, 1.5 pounds a piece. And now I want to, because they've already started to puff up and rise in this funny irregular shape, I want to deflate them. So I want to get out any extra air bubbles, and then I want to shape them and let them rise in the way that I formed them, not the way that they've decided to start forming on their own. So there are a couple of ways to do this. You could roll it out with a rolling pin, but I think it's way more fun to just slam it on the counter. And now it's time to move on to step number 6, which is to shape them. So I'm just going to put them into loaf shape since I'm making loaf bread for sandwiches. Okay, do that, you just pull out from the center, and then I like to put it down on the counter and pinch the seams together. Okay. And then you'll just kind of tuck and make it pretty. Okay. And once again, pull out from the center. It's like you're putting your thumbs together in the middle here, and then you're pulling out, down, and around, and then tucking it all together. All right, once the last loaf has been shaped, we need to let these rest. For about 30 minutes. And we are up to, by the way, step 7, rising. We've just done step 6, which was to shape. And now we're ready to let these rise. It will take about 30 minutes. What we're looking for is for the dome of the bread to come up about an inch or so above the top of the pan. So we'll set a timer for about 30 minutes, and we'll come back and check on these to see how they're doing. It's been about 30 minutes, and this bread is very nicely risen. You can see it's well above an inch above the pan, which is what we're looking for. And now we're ready for step 8, which is to put these into the oven and let them bake. And that will be at 350 degrees for about 30 minutes for this size loaf. Well, our bread is out of the oven, and very important, actually before you take it out of the oven, you'll want to pull out the rack and go ahead and put in your thermometer right into the center of the loaf, because we want to make sure that it's done all the way through the middle. And the way to do that is to look for a temperature of 190 to 200 degrees. And we are right at about 195. So this bread is done. Now, if you were afraid that your oven might have some hot spots in it or might bake unevenly, you could check each one of these. So that is done, and now we're going to take it out of the pans. And we are ready for step 9, which is cooling. Now, you think that it was hard figuring out how to mix or knead the bread. This is the hard part. This is where your house smells heavenly from freshly baked bread, and your family is dying to get their hands on this, but you've got to wait 15 minutes, and it's best if you do go ahead and set a timer at least 15 minutes before you slice into this bread. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit doughy on the inside. It's all of those little pockets where the yeast made little holes, they are full of steam. And so if you cut into the bread right now, you're going to be cutting into those little pockets of steam. And if you wait for 15 minutes, they will all dissipate. And the crust finishes setting, and so there's still some things going on. And so you want to wait at least 15 minutes before you allow anyone to slice the bread. And then you will also want to wait about 2 to 3, maybe 4 hours before you try to package the bread because it needs to completely cool. So just leave it setting out here on your cooling racks, and 15 minutes before you can slice, and 2 to 4, maybe 5 hours before you can package. Well, it's been at least 15 minutes now and the bread is cool, and so now we are finally ready for step number 10, and that is where we get to slice and eat the bread. So I'm going to show you the way that I think is the easiest to slice, and that is by turning the loaf over on its side. Okay, with a little bit of practice, you can cut nice straight pieces that are thin enough for sandwiches, but if you have any trouble, using an electric knife can really help you to slice it nicely. Now, when I am ready to put this into a storage bag, I just use a bread bag for storage, and I will leave this out. The amount that my family is going to use for the next 2 to 3 days, I will leave that much out. And then the rest of this I will want to put into the freezer so I don't have to bake again for several more days. So when I do that, I just use a freezer weight zipper bag and take one of the loaves and put it inside. Whichever way it will go. If it's too tall, you might need to put it over on its side. And then close this most of the way over, and to keep it nice and fresh so it doesn't get dried out, put a drinking straw in the corner. Press out as much of the air as you can, and then for what's left, you will just do it like that, and it kind of vacuum seals it for you. So then put this into the freezer after it's completely cool, of course. Before you put it in the bag, make sure it's completely cool. Store this in the freezer, put all of them in there just like this, and your bread will be nice and fresh when you're ready for your next loaf. Now to thaw it, you'll just take it out and let it sit in its bag. It won't take but a couple of hours to do that. You could also pre-slice it if you wanted to freeze it that way. I like to slice my bread as I use it, and that way it doesn't get dried out as fast. But either way, whichever way makes sense for your family. So we'll recap the 10 steps that we went through. The first one was to mill our fresh flour. The second was to measure ingredients, mix, and knead. And at the end of kneading, make sure you do that gluten window test so that you know that you have kneaded properly and long enough. Step number 5 was to divide it into the number of loaves that you're going to need and deflate them by slamming it on the counter. Step number 6 was to shape it into your desired shapes, whether loaves or rolls or cinnamon rolls, and then let it rise and let it bake. After it bakes, make sure you do the temperature test to make sure it's completely baked inside. Let them cool. After they've cooled, then you're ready to slice and store or freeze. So there's your 10 basic steps. And once you have mastered the basic recipe for bread, you can do a lot more things with bread dough.